stretching across the continents to provide you positive, relevant, and balanced information with fresh insight from those in the know, right in the land, focusing a biblical lens on Israel and the Middle East. You're watching Focal Point.
Hello and welcome to this new edition of Focal Point, where our point of focus is to bring you relevant information about the issues affecting Israel and the Middle East. Kevin and I are so glad you could join us today.
That's right, Stacy. We certainly are. And in today's program, we have some very essential information that you will not want to miss. Stacy, what do we have lined up for our viewers in today's program?
Well, in a little bit, Focal Point's Dan Tracy speaks with the director of the European Coalition for Israel about Israel's legal rights according to international law. And later, our UK correspondent Jeffrey Smith brings us an amazing story of a Bedouin shepherd who once dreamed of being an Israeli diplomat and now shares his unique perspective.
Also in the program, we'll bring you a Focal Point exclusive from a plastic surgeon who's also a former Israeli Knesset member, as he shares his views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You won't want to miss this one.
Analyzing the ever-changing situations in the Middle East region is always a challenge. Recently, we were blessed with the opportunity to sit down with Jonathan Spyer, a Middle East analyst and author of the book, The Transforming Fire. Jonathan shared his amazing insight with us right after speaking at the annual CFI conference in Jerusalem.
I would say there's very little chance whatsoever for a permanent status accord between the Israelis and the Palestinian national movement at any time in the immediate future. And I give two reasons for that. Firstly, because of course the Palestinians remain split in two, between the Fatah Palestinian Authority in Ramallah and the West Bank and the Gaza Authority of Hamas, the Islamists in the Gaza Strip. And while there is constant talk of reconciliation and reunification, so even were Israel to be able to reach agreement with Fatah in Ramallah, that would then not apply to the entirety of the Palestinians. The Hamas would simply reject it. I think that's the first reason why it's very unlikely. Secondly, I think it goes deeper because I would say that also on the Fatah side, there has never really been the kind of historic compromise with Israel's continued existence as a Jewish state, which would have to actually underline any real and successful peace process. And my own contention is that the peace process of the 1990s was based largely on a kind of illusion in which we chose to believe for a certain period of time that transition in thinking on the Fatah Palestinian side had taken place. But in fact, 7 years into the process, in the year 2000, it became apparent, actually, that no such transition in thinking had taken place. And we then dealt with 4 years of low-intensity warfare here in Israel. So I think it's important for us to understand that Hamas is not a standalone movement. Rather, Hamas is part of a much broader regional movement, a regional trend, which of course is the Muslim Brotherhood movement. But what we're seeing is that over the last 2 years, the Muslim Brotherhood has been on the rise in the region, in country after country, most importantly in Egypt, of course, but also in Tunisia, also now in Syria, and also further afield. And the growing legitimacy or legitimization of the Hamas enclave in Gaza, I would say ultimately is a manifestation, or is a product rather, of that larger process. If the Shia side were to win, and I think that's the side most likely to win between either of them, to win important gains such as victory in Syria potentially, or the achievement of nuclear capability for Islamic Republic of Iran. If any of those major strategic gains were to take place, I think what we might well see would then be a gravitation of Sunni Islamist forces back towards Iranian leadership. In other words, a nuclear Iran will mean a challenge to the very existence of the Middle East state system, in which the Iranians will then be backing destructive forces in country after country across the region with the intention of building a series of alliances under their own leadership. The Iranians understand the importance of the energy-rich sector of the Gulf, so they will certainly first and foremost target those small and or often thinly populated Arab monarchies with the intention either of replacing the monarchs or of making the monarchs see the Iranians as their security guarantor. They understand, the Iranians, that is where power in this region lies. And if they get a nuclear capability, they will use that as the umbrella beneath which they will build that domination, first of all of the Gulf, and thence on of the region as a whole. People need to focus on the situation in Syria. because Syria, in a certain sense right now, is the kind of center, is the kind of fulcrum of many of these processes we've been talking about in terms of the Iranian challenge to the West, in terms of Sunni-Shia conflict, in terms of Israel's vital security interests. And the fact of the matter is that Bashar Assad, the dictator Assad's policy of terrorizing the free media has meant that it's been really impossible to bring out the news from that country. And as a result, I think, the really crucial importance of what's happening in Syria hasn't impacted on the public consciousness in the West as much as it needs to and as much as it should have done. So I would just really encourage people to get any information they can from the sources of information that exist on Syria. What's happening in Syria right now is going to be of historic importance for the Middle East and for Israel in the period opening up.
After a short break, we take you to Berlin, where our Dan Tracy discusses international law with the director of the European Coalition for Israel. And later, you won't want to miss our interview with a former Israeli member of Knesset as he diagnoses the problem of the Middle East conflict.
But right now, we would like for you to see some of the real-life ministry work of Christian Friends of Israel as they continue to meet the real needs of real people every day, right in the heart of Israel. Stay with us.
My name is Ray Sanders. I'm the Executive Director and Co-Founder of Christian Friends of Israel, Jerusalem. We welcome you to our program today and trust that things that are shared with you will be an encouragement to you as you seek to bless and to serve the Jewish people. Thank you for joining us.
You know, Jerusalem has a real spiritual significance behind it. It's the city of the great king. So much has happened here through history, and so much will happen here in the future. We ask that you would become watchmen on the walls for Israel. And we have a wall of prayer program that's online. We have a number of online publications, and all you have to do is go to our website and sign up. And we have a new distribution center in Jerusalem that's been restored and remodeled. We opened it in the 1990s, and over 250,000 Russian Jews have been helped through clothing, through appliances, bedding, bath, and financial help. CFI has a bridal salon where we help Jewish brides to be blessed upon their wedding day, a very special gift from the nations. Streams of Blessing is for the very poorest of the poor and needy throughout Israel. Walk-ins off of the street, former war veterans who fought in the Red Army. Hope for the Future helps the Ethiopian Jewry who's come on some miraculous airlifts. They have a lot of needs that they have. Forsake Them Not reaches out to Jewish people who have suffered during the Holocaust that are still alive in their 80s and 90s, and they need to know that we care, that we're on the ground helping them with all the needs that they have. And Under His Wings and Communities Under Attack is the program that we help those who are suffering under terror attacks in the south of Israel and in various other cities throughout the land. First Fruits is our ministry to believers in the land, be they Jewish or Arab or Gentile. We help all alike, encourage them in their walk of faith. So if you want to help undo damage that was done in the name of the church for 2,000 years, we ask you to join us. Come alongside of us, partner with us, and let us change history and the world, that all may see that we're making a difference in Israel amongst the church and amongst all those who want to be a blessing. We're here for you to be your hands and feet in Israel. Partner with us today and help us change history. Shalom from Jerusalem.
To partner with the Ministry of Christian Friends of Israel through prayer, volunteering, or financial gifts, please visit cfijerusalem.org.
Welcome back. Defending a small country like Israel is indeed no small matter. FocalPoint's Dan Tracy recently sat down for a discussion about international law and the defense for Israel's very existence.
Hi, Kevin. This is Dan coming to you from Berlin, the capital of Germany. I have the opportunity while I'm here to talk with Thomas Sandel, who is the head and also one of the founders of the European Coalition for Israel, a lobbying group active in the European Union Parliament in Brussels. What are some of the major issues that you deal with in that coalition, and how do you deal with them?
There are many issues. Anti-Semitism obviously still being a question in Europe, sadly so. But I also think there's a shift, and it has to do with the legitimacy of the whole modern state of Israel. And there we are facing an increasing hostile environment where you have those who would even question the whole raison d'etre of a Jewish state as such. And the way that we tackle these issues is not then to go to the Bible and say, well, Genesis 12:3 says this, but to go to international law. And it's interesting that actually international law would confirm the biblical covenants. But instead of talking about the biblical covenants, we speak about the human covenants, starting with the San Remo resolution of 1920.
Now, the strategy of actually basing it on international law is actually quite unique. It's a departure from what a normal Christian viewpoint would be. Now, how is that strategy working?
It is working well. We have, just over the last 12 months, 24 months, we've been in national parliaments all over the world, not only in Europe, but also in Tokyo, Japan. There's been presentations in the US Congress. And there has not been one event so far where people would have questioned the basic foundations that we are building our narrative on. And that is quite remarkable.
Do you have any success stories that you can share, things where your input has made a difference, a discernible difference?
Well, I think first of all we have to look at it as a process. The first and the most difficult step in that process is actually to be heard. To give you an example, exactly a year ago we were able to host ambassadors of the UN Security Council. And the fact that we had a whole luncheon with their full attention, being able to explain in detail what we are saying, I would obviously consider that as a major breakthrough and success. On a more as an anecdote, I just realized this week that when the Foreign Secretary John Kerry spoke to the Congress, he interestingly used an expression that we have reintroduced into the peace process, and that is give peace a chance. Our 50-minute video, which is spelling out this legal foundation of Israel, has this theme, give peace a chance. All of a sudden, he sort of stops and then he said, well, give peace a chance.
How can our viewers support the efforts that you're doing?
It's like in all Christian work, and it also includes what we do in advocacy, and that is prayer. It would be easy to say that we can outsmart the other side. We cannot. It is a spiritual battle. It will continue to be a spiritual battle, and we really need the prayer support of believers who believe in these values, believe in supporting Israel.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for your time. Thank you for the interview. I appreciate very much that you've taken the time for us today.
Thank you.
Here at Focal Point, we like to bring you positive stories of life in Israel. Focal Point's Jeffrey Smith had the recent pleasure to interview the author of the book, A Shepherd's Journey, where a young boy's dream of becoming a diplomat for his country became a positive reality.
Ishmael Kadal was brought up as a Bedouin shepherd in Western Galilee, near Haifa. We met up with him recently when he called in to the CFI office in Eastbourne in the UK.
The best known part of our culture is hospitality, and it's deep. It's coming from deep from the heart, and that means that you have basic values of respect for others, commitment for family, and or mutual respect that you can take wherever you are. You can not to agree with others, you can have different opinions or hear different opinions from other people, even your enemies, but you have to respect them. For decades now, looking at it, I think there is a misjudgment, which makes or create misconception and misperception about Israel in general, or I would say information, misleading information. Sadly enough, life is much more, different. Israel's population consists of 20% Muslims who are living like everybody else. Muslims and of course Christians and Druze, and of course the Bedouins are part of that minority, not Jewish minority in Israel. And I think this is the beauty of what a democracy is. Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Those issues I think are not fairly portrayed here, are not fairly, I would say, reported here. People look, the media brings here only the conflict. Again, that's one of the riddles. Why do media portray Israel as an apartheid state, as a racist state? First of all, they have no idea what is an apartheid. If Israel, if you go to the definition of an apartheid, that's a discrimination based on color, religion, ethnicity. You are discriminated against only because you are black, only because you are Christian or Muslim, or only. But this is not happening, in Israel at all. And Israel, I'm saying again, having its own issues. There are differences between, Arabs and Jews, Jewish different communities. But to say that Israel is an apartheid, that someone like myself couldn't be an Israeli diplomat, that someone who is not Jewish can't be a Supreme Court judge, or can't serve, be elected as a parliament member, those things doesn't exist, not in reality, and of course there's no even legal form that prevent non-Jews from doing those positions. So I wouldn't be standing in front of you here representing the whole entire state of Israel if Israel would be an apartheid. I think, Israel, after 65 years of existence, prosperous, flourishing, succeeding, despite the wars that it went through, will keep aspiring for peace. The prophecy of Ezekiel, if I remember well, speaks about that clearly. That the people of Israel will keep facing enemies until the very establishing of the state. But then the Lord will protect it to show and prove there's one Lord. And I think this is a very important value that we have to believe in. And if we believe in, the future of Israel will look much more promising.
What a tremendous perspective from someone whose dream came true and is now building a positive future for Israel.
Absolutely. As we take another break, we would like for you to see even more of the positive work that Christian Friends of Israel is doing in the land today as they continue to reach out to those most in need.
Shalom, my name is Ray Sanders. I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of Christian Friends of Jerusalem. We welcome you to our program today and trust you'll be blessed by all that we share of what's happening in Israel in these last days. Thank you for being with us.
Ray and I live in the greatest city on earth, Jerusalem. Here was where the beginning of Christian Friends of Israel started, and we now have representatives in nations around the world. And we have a new distribution center in Jerusalem that's been restored and remodeled. We opened it in the 1990s, and over 250,000 Russian Jews have been helped through clothing, through appliances, bedding, bath, and financial help. Forsake Them Not reaches out to Jewish people who have suffered during the Holocaust, that are still alive in their 80s and 90s, and they need to know that we care, that we're on the ground helping them with all the needs that they have. Hope for the Future helps the Ethiopian Jewry, who's come on some miraculous airlifts. They have a lot of needs that they have. CFI has a bridal salon where we help Jewish brides to be blessed upon their wedding day, a very special gift from the nations. Streams of Blessing is for the very poorest of the poor and needy throughout Israel. Walk-ins off of the street, former war veterans who fought in the Red Army. And under his wings and communities under attack is the program that we help those who are suffering under terror attacks in the south of Israel and in various other cities throughout the land. First Fruits is our ministry to believers in the land, be they Jewish or Arab or Gentile. We help all alike, encourage them in their walk of faith. We ask that you would become watchmen on the walls for Israel. And we have a Wall of Prayer program that's online. We have a number of online publications, and all you have to do is go to our website and sign up. So if you want to help undo damage that was done in the name of the church for 2,000 years, we ask you to join us. Come alongside of us, partner with us, and let us change history and the world, that all may see that we're making a difference in Israel amongst the church and amongst all those who want to be a blessing. We're here for you to be your hands and feet in Israel. Partner with us today and help us change history. Shalom from Jerusalem.
To partner with the Ministry of Christian Friends of Israel through prayer, volunteering, or financial gifts, please visit cfijerusalem.org.
In bringing this edition of Focal Point to a close, our final segment is a Focal Point exclusive from a former Israeli member of Knesset. During a recent trip to Jerusalem, we sat down with Arie Aldad, a plastic surgeon and former IDF Surgeon General, to get his diagnosis of the Israeli-Palestinian situation today.
I am a plastic surgeon. I was the IDF, Israel Defense Forces, Surgeon General for a few years before I became a member of Knesset. And I went to the Knesset to be involved in preventive medicine. And my main job was to prevent the creation of a Palestinian state. That for me is a preventive medicine, because I belong to those people who believe that if, God forbid, we will have a Palestinian state in the heartland of Israel, Israel will be in deep, deep trouble. If not in another wave of bloodshed, another intifada, another wave of terror, and the Arabs will have much better positions to endanger the very existence of the state of Israel. But I'm sure you, as most of the people who are involved in the Israeli-Arab conflict, are very frustrated because we do not reach peace. And it's amazing because so many good people for such a long time are trying their best to bring peace to this region. And I will take an example from my medical world. And if you will have a sore throat or fever for a few days, you will go to your physician and he will examine you, and he may reach the diagnosis that you suffer from a strep throat, and he will prescribe you some penicillin, and usually it works. If it doesn't, you'll go back to your physician and say, what's wrong? I mean, still very bad. He may re-examine your throat, and he will see 2 tonsils red with white spots, and he will think maybe the bacteria in your throat are not sensitive to the antibiotics that he prescribed you. He will change the antibiotics. Usually it works. He may try a 3rd or a 4th or a 5th antibiotics until, God forbid, you expire, or the reasonable physician should stop and think, what's wrong? The very best explanation for it is misdiagnosis of the disease. We are sure that we are involved in a territorial conflict with the Arabs in Israel. And the cure for a territorial conflict is division of the land, sharing of the land. We tried it maybe 30 times, again and again and again, and each time it ended up in a worse bloodshed, in a worse intifada, in a worse terror wave. The problem is that we misdiagnose the disease. It's not a territorial conflict, even though it has some territorial symptoms. We are involved in a religious war, in an ideological clash, and you can't cure an ideological clash by drawing a border on the map. It's not going to solve the problem. I'm afraid that I don't have good news for many people. We are going to have war with the Arabs for many, many years. We are not going to have peace with them. And we fool ourselves if we think that if we just divide the land, if we give them back the 67 borders, if we divide Jerusalem, we are going to cure it. We're just going to cause a higher flames for this conflict. What I am suggesting is not going to bring peace, because the true reason, the true causes of the conflict are of a religious war, of an ideological clash, but it will allow reduction of the flames, reduction of friction, less bloodshed. That's what I call preventive medicine.
Life in Israel can certainly be challenging, to say the least. But with a solid understanding and people making positive change, there is always hope for a better tomorrow. Perhaps today's guests have helped to show us just that.
For me, the bottom line is God is in control. And always, I want to encourage our viewers to pray for those volunteering in the land. And please pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Don't forget that we love when you email us with your thoughts about the show, as well as topic ideas for future shows at info@FocalPointTV.com.
Remember when you write to let us know where you're viewing Focal Point in your country. And if you would like us added to any Christian networks you might watch.
You can always reach us by calling the number on your screen. If we happen to miss your call, please feel free to leave a message and someone will return your call. We look forward to being with you next time as we turn our point of focus to Israel and the Middle East.
Right here on Focal Point. Thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.
Goodbye.
Focal Point is brought to you by Christian Friends of Israel, Jerusalem. For more information about any of today's guests, email us at info@FocalPointTV.com. To partner with the Ministry of Christian Friends of Israel through prayer, volunteering, or financial gifts, please visit cfijerusalem.org. Focal Point is a production of Level E Media Incorporated.